Morning, colleagues. I hope you understand us very well. You are hearing the colleagues from DOCO speaking. My name is Frederick Matuza. I'm the regional advisor, and I'm here together with Patience Al-Idri, who is the program specialist on the UNDAF. She actually guided the whole process on the UNDAF. And in Geneva, we also have Rio Hada and Giovanna Rosignetti, who are the co-chairs of the UNDAF task team, and they will present themselves later themselves. Just some practicalities. You should see a box where you can put in your questions at any time during the webinar. If you have a question, please feel free to add your question there. We will be answering after the presentations. We will not be able to give you the floor to speak yourself because of technical problems. So all questions should be in the box where you put the questions. And I do hope that you hear me. It would be useful if some of you would put in the chat box if they hear me or not. So I know that I'm not speaking to nobody here. And with that, okay, I get the confirmation that we're well heard. I will give the floor to Rio and Giovanna, who will be giving the first part of the presentation, and after that, we will listen to Patience, and I will take over for the rest and moderate the Q&A. Thank you. Rio, Giovanna, the floor is yours.
Good morning, colleagues, or good afternoon, depending on where you are sitting. My name is Giovanna Rosignetti, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Department of Strategic Programming and Management in ILO. And it is my pleasure to welcome you at this webinar on a general introduction to the new UNDAF guidance on behalf of also of the other co-chairs of the UNDAF task team within the program UNDG program working group. Here with me is Rio Hada, as Frederick said, who is the Human Rights Officer at the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights.
Hello, colleagues.
And Dan Seymour, who is the third co-chair of this task team, excuses himself as he couldn't attend this webinar due to previous commitments. By way of kick-starting this discussion, Rio and I will give you a general overview of on the guidance, and in particular, I will start with some general remarks on the process, how the process unfolded, and some key highlights on the document itself. And Rio will go further into the substance of the content and what is new relative to the 2010 UNDAF guidance. So, in terms of introduction, Fred, maybe you could put slide 3. 3 main points. The first is, as you know, this new UNDAF guidance, which was endorsed at UNDG level in February 17, has been prepared in response to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And really the idea from the outset has been to provide guidance to a new generation of UNDAFs, or equivalent planning frameworks, reflecting this agenda and UNDG commitments. Obviously, the guidance has also responded to the 2016 QCPR, and in particular the call therein for strengthening of results-based management, promoting women's empowerment and gender equality, the active and full participation of national governments in UNDAF process, also the simplification of the UNDAF process itself, and the strengthening of joint programming processes across the UN system. So therefore, the current guidance could not, or the work on this guidance could not have been more timely. Second, the guidance is the result of a very extensive and intensive consultative process which lasted approximately for 2 years. We have had 5 rounds of system-wide invitation for comments, besides consultations via webinars, online surveys, meetings, and a workshop. And this involved some 21 entities of the program working group, but particular attention was paid to feedback from the UNDG working mechanism, the other working groups, for instance, the working group on sustainable development, transition, communication, and human rights, with the view to ensure a coherent approach across the work of the different working groups, as well as from field colleagues, in particular regional UNDGs, peer support groups, and UNCT's members. The third point is that we are aware that if each entity had developed this document separately, they would or could have shaped it differently. But this is really the document that you have in front of you, that is the result of this process, represents a broad consensus amongst all the program working group entities, after very careful consideration of the concerns of all the entities involved. In terms of what is new, Fred, if you could move to the next slide. Certainly, the guidance is not a set of rules and regulation. This has been very clear from the outset. Rather, it lays out minimum requirements for all UNCTs to respond to the imperatives of the 2030 agenda. And a particular concern throughout the development of the guidance was to strike a balance between standardization and flexibility, with a view to allow for the necessary adaptation to different country contexts. The guidance, which is also requires innovation at country level. Next, the guidance comprises 2 main parts. Part 1 focuses on defining the key principles and approaches for integrated programming at the country level. The second part lays out the key steps for developing and managing the UNDAF throughout the UNDAF cycle, from the roadmap through to the evaluation of an UNDAF. In addition, at this point in time, we are in the process of complementing 8 companion pieces, because an effort was made in developing the guidance to keep it quite strategic and succinct. Obviously, this is the result of long reiterations, because when we started off, this was a very long document, but we realized that we were doing field colleagues a disservice if we were not able to provide a succinct and easy to use document. So with that in mind, we decided to develop separately 8 companion pieces which are meant to provide more hands-on guidance on the how-to with respect to specific elements of the guidance. And these companion pieces cover the CCA, the Common Country Analysis, the Vision 2030, the Theory of Change, the Programming Principles, Funding to Financing, Capacity Development, Advocacy and Communication, and Results Monitoring and Evaluation. And on that note, I would like to hand over, to give the floor to Rio. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Giovanna. So this is Rio. I'm going to present in a few minutes a couple of highlights about this new guidance compared to the old. The first point is that we very much wanted this guidance to help you focus UN programming to support the implementation of the 2030 agenda and to advance the more coherent programming approaches that brings together the key UN pillars, development, humanitarian, human rights, and peace-building agendas. And as you know, the new Secretary General is also very much supportive of this integrated approach with the inclusion of peace and security, humanitarian, human rights in our development work. The second point is that this new guidance updates the programming principles that are key to provide a normative foundation for the UNDAF in integrated programming in all country contexts. I'm going to speak a little bit more about this a little bit later. It makes the common country analysis as a minimum requirement, and Fred will talk more about what are the minimum requirements in the UNDAF, and also recommends a shared long-term visioning exercise, the so-called UN Vision 2030. The new guidance reaffirms using the theory of change in UNDAF design and also supports closer integration of UN's normative and operational contributions, and programming principles should help us in doing so. It employs the agreed MAPS approach. It also highlights the critical importance of supporting countries by reinforcing the strategic planning and delivery effectiveness through the business operations strategy, the BOSS. And the next slide, please, Fred. And also strengthen the effective implementation of UNDAF through the SOPs, the Standard Operating Procedures. It also updates the UNDAF annual review processes to better inform the UN system stakeholders on UNDAF implementation. And also the new guidance encourages country team to be innovative, and it calls for broader engagement of diverse actors to inform all stages of the UNDAF process, starting from the CCA, strategic planning and monitoring and evaluation. And by doing so, it should result in a greater transparency and accountability of our work to the people that we support and work with. It emphasized the role of disaggregated data collections analysis in support of implementing and monitoring the SDGs. And it introduces the element of financing the UNDAF. So moving from funding to the financing in the context of the wider development financing landscape at the country level and the overall investment in the SDGs. And finally, it introduces a set of quality criteria against which UNDAFs can be quality assured, monitored, and evaluated. Moving on to the next slide, I'm going to spend a few more minutes to talk a little bit more about the programming principles, which is at the core of the UNDAF process. So the UNDG has identified 4 programming principles, with leaving no one behind as the overarching principle that unifies the UN programming, but not only programming, policy and advocacy efforts across the UN country team. This leaving no one behind is underpinned, as you can see in the illustration, by other 3 programming principles: human rights and gender equality, sustainability and resilience, and accountability. Applied in an integrated manner, these principles can help the UN development system to better respond to the latest QCPR directives, as Giovanna was saying, to reduce the fragmentation and enhance the coherence and efficiency, and to address a full range of development challenges as set out in the 2030 agenda. And so these programming principles can be considered as substantive, the what's of what we need to do to address the challenges. And we have 6 key enablers or approaches, which helps us to take us forward. And these are results-focused programming, capacity development, risk-informed programming, and development, humanitarian and peace-building linkages, coherent policy support, and partnership. And in some of these, there will be a companion guidance piece on the programming principles, and we will also have a separate companion pieces on some of these key enablers. With that, I will hand over to Fred and Doko to talk about the minimum requirements of the UNDAF.
It's actually Patience who will be talking. Patience.
Okay.
Okay. Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues, wherever you are. My name is Patience Alidri, the Policy Specialist System-Wide Programming at DOCO. As Fred mentioned, my role has been to support the Program Working Group and the UNDAF task team in their preparation of the new UNDAF guidance, along with my other DOCO colleagues, including Fred. In regard to the minimum requirements for the new UNDAFs, there are 6 of them. I will very briefly go through them, but dwell more on the second slide, which also makes reference to the minimum requirements. Now, these minimum requirements are the minimum standards for alignment to Agenda 2030 and UN support to member states. The first requirement is that the UNCT will be expected to develop a roadmap for UNDAF preparation. Secondly, they will need to develop a high-quality, evidence-based common country assessment. And then the third is that the UNCT will decide on the UNDAF strategic priorities based on CCA and UN Vision 2030. Now, the strategic priorities will need to be supported by an overarching UNDAF theory of change and a corresponding results matrix at the outcome level and medium-term common budgetary framework. The fourth minimum requirement is that the UNDAF and its legal annex are signed by all participating UN organizations and a relevant government representative. The fifth minimum requirement is that the UN at country level will prepare joint work plans which are signed by participating UN organizations within the results groups to operationalize the UNDAF outcomes. Lastly, you prepare and implement a costed multi-year monitoring and evaluation plan. And within that, the UN at the country level will be expected to prepare annual 1 UN country results reports and also undertake an UNDAF evaluation once during the life cycle of the UNDAF. The costs for implementing the UNDAF evaluation will be shared among UNCT members. Now, the next thing I'd like to try to elaborate a little bit more about is how to design your UNDAF. And I note there are 7 key steps for the UNDAF process that we need to pay attention to. The first is that you prepare an UNDAF roadmap. In the UNDAF roadmap, you lay out the key steps, milestones for preparation of the UNDAF. You look at the timeline and the division of labor as well for the UNCT members. There's a discussion that will need to happen as well about the resource requirement for implementing the UNDAF process, including the technical expertise that will be needed to make this happen. During the roadmap preparation, there's going to be need to discuss as well the support that will be required from the regional UNDG. It's important to note that the UNDAF roadmap preparation process is inclusive of all the UN members in the country, but also that it needs to be inclusive in terms of consultation with national stakeholders. The second important step is the preparation of the common country analysis. Now, the common country analysis is the United Nations independent and mandate-based articulation of the country context, its opportunities and challenges, covering sustainable development, human rights, gender equality, peace and security, and humanitarian perspectives. Now, this will be done by reviewing already existing data and analysis, such as the national, context analysis done by the national government and other stakeholders. And within that, we pull that together, identify gaps that there may be in existing data, and based on that, there may be need to do additional research or data collection to beef up those gaps. It's important to note that in doing the common country analysis, this is the point at which we identify the key target groups that have been left behind, including geographical locations and populations that will need to be targeted by the UN in the UNDAF preparation process. At the stage of doing the CCA, the UN also takes the opportunity to review, to analyze its comparative advantage within the particular country. Next step is preparation of Vision 2030. As earlier mentioned by my colleague, Vision 2030 is highly recommended. It's the longer-term vision of UN support to the country. In other words, it answers the question, how does medium-term UNDAFs fit into the longer-term 2030 agenda? And we do this making reference to the National Vision 2030. We need to look at the evolving UN role and its positioning in the country as we prepare the Vision 2030. The next step is strategic prioritization. Taking into account the common country analysis and Vision 2030, the UN in the country will need to come up with a limited number of strategic priorities, agree on key UNDAF outcomes, and design the medium-term common budgetary framework. Having done that, then we move to the next step. The UNDAF is prepared, document is prepared under the strategic priorities, And now we move on to the implementation. And implementation, as you will already know, will happen through joint work plans. And it is at this stage that the outputs related to are identified that relate to the strategic priorities. And these outputs and key activities are as well defined to operationalize the outputs. At this stage, we see the clarity in division of labor between the different UN members to deliver on outputs and therefore the various outcomes. At this point as well, joint programs may be identified where relevant. Next, and the sixth step here is the annual review of the UNDAFs and joint work plans. We expect that annually the UN in the country will come together with its national partners and particularly national governments to review the UN performance on the joint work plans. The results monitoring that has happened in the course of the year fits into this process. This in itself is an important opportunity for the UN to transparently account to stakeholders about their contribution to national priorities. And through the one UN country results report, which is published with consent of national government, we have full transparency of what the UN is achieving within the country. Next. Now, the one UN country report, results report, feeds into the common country analysis, because as we have the annual reviews, we generate information which helps us to update our common country and our understanding of the country context. And this report as well feeds into the UNDAF evaluation. And at this point, I also want to say the UNDAF evaluation does generate information which helps us to update the common country analysis. I'll stop here for now and hand over to my friend Fred.
Thank you, Patience. As Giovanna mentioned earlier, this is guidance. This is not rules and regulations. So it might be interesting to already look a little bit what we see currently in the new generation of UNDAFs, and these are some new trends that we are seeing. One, we have a lot more focus and fewer strategic priorities. On an average, 3 to 5 strategic priorities, results areas, key areas, whatever you want to call them, and more detailed and focused outcomes. Normative agenda at the center of all our UNDAFs. If we look at the data from the UNDG information management system, last year 166 out of 766 results groups were focused on human rights. And we also see this in the new UNDAFs. 70% of the new UNDAFs that started in 2016 have something on support to the national partners in preparation of the UPR, the follow-up of the UPR, and the recommendations. We're going from UN Development Assistance Framework to UN Partnership Framework for Sustainable Development. We were hoping in the QCPR that we would be able to change the name from UNDAF to United Nations Sustainable Development Framework. That unfortunately has not materialized, so the official name remains the United Nations Development Assistance Framework. That does not prevent you of having a nice subtitle, partnership framework, sustainable framework. There's a lot of different examples out there. I think what's more important than the title is more the spirit behind this change. We're going from assistance to real partnerships. Support to data quality, incredibly important, as also was mentioned by Rio earlier. All the UNDAFs that we have seen recently have a specific focus on data collection, monitoring, reporting. Some UNDAFs, the more recent one, actually have a very specific outcome only on support to data quality. Last week we were in Togo for the regional UNDAF rollout workshop, a very important point, and you see that a lot of UN country teams are also trying to focus on that and bringing the capacity as a UN country team together on their statistics. Because very often different agencies are already doing it, but it's better to do it together. broader and multi-stakeholder engagement. CCA, for example, we're not doing by one consultant himself. We're actually trying to set up a multi-stakeholder dialogue. I think the post-2015 consultations that many of you countries have been doing is actually a nice example that the UN is able to go to the people and ask what their concerns are. South-South triangular cooperation, very clear. The majority of the new UNDAFs have something on South-South cooperation in them. There are some regions who are testing multi-country UN development framework. For example, in the Caribbean, there will be one UNDAF for 18 countries with country implementation plans. And then, that's already mentioned, we see a lot of new innovative approaches for strategic planning, open data, real-time monitoring, crowdsourcing, using citizen data, modern analytical tools such as Foresight, etc., etc. You're of course not alone on this. There's a wide range of support, and what I would like to highlight from this slide is that your first point of entry is the peers in your region. There's a wealth of knowledge out there. There's an amazing things happening at the country level. The regional workshops which are organized by the regional UNDG, we had already one in Eastern and Southern Africa and Western and Central Africa, and the other regions are following as well. But it's amazing to see how much experience is already out there. So contact your neighboring countries, contact your colleagues. You of course have the regional UNDG. You can come to DOCO. The staff college is doing some courses on UN common programming. You have your regional peer support groups. You have other networks, and importantly, you also have your own HQ agency. And with that, I propose that we're going to the Q&A. And before launching the Q&A, I will also launch a small poll during this webinar. Somewhere on your screen, you should now see a poll which you can answer. And the question is, I feel that my UN city has the capacity to develop an innovative UNDAF adapted to answer to the 2030 agenda. Thank you very much. I see a lot of answers already coming in. And we also have quite a few questions coming in. I propose that I'll take the easy questions, and then the difficult questions I will give to Giovanna and Rio. The first question is a very practical question. Where can we find the new guidance? This is coming from Natasha Paddison from UNICEF Cambodia. We haven't put the new guidance online. We're doing a last kind of graphic design, so it will be available quite soon. We might put a temporary version on our website so you have it available. Vridau from the regional UNDG in Western and Central Africa is asking what's the exact name of the new UNDAF guidance. Is it UNDAF 2016 or UNDAF 2017? Let's call it the 2017 UNDAF guidance, since it was approved by the UNDG in 2017. And what's the period cover of this guidance? Is it until 2030 or less? And I'm asking Giovanna and Rio to take note of that question, to also answer. I think the short answer is we don't quite have decided that yet. It's definitely adapted to go for the 2030 agenda, but the world is a fast-changing place, so we might have to revise that. Danston from the regional UNDG in Eastern and Southern Africa is asking, how does visioning compare to backcasting? Backcasting is just another tool that you can be using, and you basically start what is the anticipated outcome that you would like to achieve, for example, by 2030, and then you're going to see what are the conditions that you need to put in place. So instead of doing a foresight, like we have now this and this is different scenarios that might be running out, you actually start with the end results and see what you have to do. There's a lot of different tools and examples. on Vision 2030, and I think they're also on our website. A question from Manuel Zerihun from Geneva, working on system-wide issues. First question, and Rio, Giovanna, I'll start giving these questions to you, and we'll be happy to complement. Is the annual reporting at the UNDAF level mentioned earlier in the presentation? Is it the same as the SDG annual country report referred to in other presentation documents, or are these different levels of reporting? That's the first question. Second question, the Vision 2030 is not mandatory, but seems to be the connecting piece between the UNDAF as the only system-wide framework at the country level and the 2030 agenda. How is the overall UNDAF process integrated or linked to the SDG process, and particularly the voluntary national reviews? Maybe Rio and Giovanna, let's start with this question. Rio, Giovanna?
The reporting process is
Rio or Giovanna, can you hear us? Did you hear the question?
yes.
Sorry, could you repeat that one about the reporting process?
Is the annual reporting at the UNDAF level, so the one UN country results report, is that the same as the SDG annual country report referred to in the other presentations, or is this a different level of reporting? That's the first question.
Oh, okay. Okay, so basically, I mean, we don't put sort of a fixed formula on this, but of course, what we will encourage the country team to do is naturally to align the UNDAF, the reporting and reporting with the national reporting processes that's ongoing at the country level. But since different country governments may have a different process and times, we don't sort of put the fixed formula on this, but the general idea is that the country teams are encouraged to align as much as possible with the national reporting cycles, and here not only SDGs, but there are also other reporting that happens at the country level to the, for example, the Universal Periodic Review, Human Rights Council or Human Rights Treaty bodies, ILO's convention monitoring bodies. So the idea is that we encourage the country team to streamline these processes and try to link these different reporting processes as much as possible.
If I may come in, I would like to add one thing on this, because it's linked to another question that we have seen on the screen, popping up on the screen, concerning streamlining of the different processes going on at the country level. And this has been one thing that, and how the new UNDAF represents a simplification relative to the previous one, a simplification of the process. And this has been one thing that we have been, has retained a lot of attention during the revision of the UNDAF guidance, because this was also a concern escalated by UNCTs. Now, the real challenge when it comes to simplification at country level continues to lie with the fact that the need to prepare UNDAFs and agency-specific planning documents simultaneously. And this is an issue that has not been completely resolved at the country level in the UNDAF, but certainly what the new guidance states or aims at more strongly is a stronger alignment between the UNDAF process and agency planning documents, and also alignment between UN planning processes and country-owned planning processes, which should pay off in the mid to long term. Then, to complement Fred's response on the duration, the validity of this UNDAF, obviously we don't. This was not something that we didn't put an end date for this UNDAF guidance, but certainly something that we have been discussing throughout the process was the need for keeping the guidance a living document. And this is very much also the spirit of the more practical how to companion pieces, companion guidance pieces on the 8 topics that I referred to earlier. The idea is that these documents first will include a lot of examples, real practice example coming out of country experience, but also that these documents will be updated periodically to remain relevant. Over. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanna and Rio. And I just want to give the floor to Alex Fries, who is really working on SDGs a lot and has something to contribute on the SDG national reporting.
Hello, colleagues. Maybe just to very quickly address the question on the relationship between the UNDAF annual report and the SDG country reports. Maybe some of you have followed our webinar that we had a couple of weeks ago, where we invited DESA, who's supporting the high-level political forum here in New York, taking place annually, where countries are presenting their voluntary national reviews. We also had a colleague from the regional commissions talking about the regional level sustainable development fora and also reporting process there. And then we had a colleague on the SDG indicator framework. And then finally, we had a colleague from the UNDG speaking about our recently launched UNDG guidance on the SDG country reports. So maybe some of you have seen that and now are wondering about the relationship between the two. So maybe just to clarify that the SDG country reporting guidelines are really the continuation of what I would assume many of you have maybe been involved with the MDG reports. So I think there have been almost 500 reports produced in the MDG period. But that is a very much government-owned, country-led process, as many of you know. It's really to report on progress towards the MDGs or now the SDGs by the government. And in many cases, the UN supported the process, provided advice, maybe facilitated some stakeholder engagement, supported the data side, and so forth. So that is really very much a government-led process that the UN can support and hopefully has the space and the opportunity to kind of enrich the process. But it's really the accountability of the government to make progress towards the SDGs. So that is, I think, very different to the UNDAF annual report, which is the accountability or the mutual accountability between government and the UN for the UN results, and to show our collective contribution to the SDGs as the UN in partnership with the government. But I hope that is clear. I think also if you take a look at the SDG country reporting guidelines by the UNDG that are on our website, you will see the differentiation between the two. But if you have any further questions on that, happy to answer those. Maybe you've also seen the note we shared on the CPN and through other networks. But feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Just in the interest of time, Rio, Giovanna, if you agree, I will just take a couple of questions and answer them immediately. But feel free to interrupt me. A question from Giulietta from Mozambique regarding the number of strategic priorities. The short answer is we did not put in any specific guidance on how many number of strategic priorities are acceptable. In general, what we see is around 3 to 5 big strategic priorities with a number of outcomes making them a little bit more detailed. I think personally, and again, there is no guidance on this, around 3 to 5 strategic priorities operationalized and about 10 outcomes maximum would be the maximum that you can do. It also depends on the level of the outcome that you have done, on the capacity of your UN country team, of your UN country team. So you really have to make that decision at the country level. Another question from Julieta is with regards to the joint work plans and joint programs. Can we have both? Absolutely. The idea is that you operationalize your UNDAF through joint annual work plans or joint work plans that are on a rolling basis for the duration of your UNDAF. Once you have your joint work plans, and the biggest objective of a joint work plan is to have a division of labor between the different UN agencies. It does not mean that you need to start implementing everything together between all the UN agencies. But if you see within a joint work plan there is an area where increased cooperation would be useful, then you could develop a joint program. Another big reason to develop a joint program is when you see a potential for resource mobilization from donors. For those colleagues who are on the Coordination Practice Network, yesterday Marie from the Multi-Partner Trust Fund Office answered to a query from Cameroon on this specific subject for more details. Question from Mats. The new guidance seems to talk about results-focused programming. Is this a new name for results-based management or something new? And also looking at patients, if she would like to ask something. I mean, the results-based management is still mentioned, and it's still the same. I think the reason why we have changed it a little bit is because results-based management can also hamper progress and finalizing an UNDAF results matrix. I've seen in many UN country teams that the last 3 months of the UNDAF, the discussions are, shall we use the word reinforced or strengthened? And that really doesn't matter. So it's more about the spirit. We are trying to program in a results-focused way using results-based management without it becoming a real big mantra. Question from Ludmila: when will the companion pieces be available? I'll give this one to patients.
Okay, the work on the companion pieces has progressed and it's in quite some advanced stages. Our initial plan was to have this released by end of this quarter. And so it remains work in progress. We expect at least sometime in April that we will begin to release the companion pieces to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Samira, which I think works in Haiti. How to foster an UNDAF that can cover important humanitarian needs like Haiti with the humanitarian response plan and other humanitarian planning documents. Next week we actually have a dedicated webinar to specifically look in that, but just to give you a short answer, there are a lot of examples out where the UNDAF and the integrated strategic framework, which peacekeeping missions are normally doing, are being merged in an UNDAF plus or an ISF plus or something along those lines. So it's basically programming of the development and the peace operations together in one document. With regard to the humanitarian response plans, we're also trying to have this in one overall framework for all UN country teams together with the missions, the humanitarian country teams. The big challenge there is that humanitarian response plans are a document with a wider range of actors, including civil society. And so the second big challenge that we have there is that the funding from donors is very often coming from a different pot at their headquarters. Even if we would try to merge everything, humanitarian development, donors still have a funding line, budget line for humanitarian and a budget line for development. So what we have seen as good examples is that you basically have an outcome specifically on the humanitarian, and then the operationalization as the humanitarian response plan. So at least it is aligned. It is not something that's done completely differently. And most importantly, the whole analysis part is done jointly. You don't want to do a CCA on the development side and a strategic analysis for the humanitarian. You kind of use this all together, because if we're not trying to bring the development partners and the humanitarians together, we're going to continue in this vicious cycle of solving humanitarian challenges without looking at the longer-term development. So the strategic analysis part is really, really important. There's a couple of questions to have more detailed guidance on the best practices, for example, for the Vision 2030. The companion pieces will have quite some links on examples, and I would also like to make some marketing for our blog. It's called silofighters.org, and you see a lot of good examples out there. And Giovanna and Rio, they might also want to complement here. One of the reasons why we did not put very specific tools and examples is exactly to keep that innovation and flexibility at the country level. The guidance gives you the framework of what we believe should be the minimum of quality in the new UNDAFs, so that we're able to address the 2030 agenda. We do not want to give you one recipe that you can apply across the 131 UN country teams. There's a lot of good examples out there, and every day there are even more examples. Unless Giovanna and Rio interrupt me, we'll just continue.
Yes, in terms of Vision 2030, I see that one of the person asked about backcasting, but that's just one of the possible methods that the country team can use, and the companion guidance on the Vision 2030 also talks about the foresight processes or scenario analysis as sort of a different way in which you can conduct this Vision 2030 exercises. And yes, it also includes a few, I don't know about the best, but certainly good practices or practical examples. Thank you.
Thank you, Rio. Another question from Mats from Zambia on the joint work plans. There's different approaches to joint work plans, multi-year to project-based work plans to more detailed annual work plan. Will we have guidance? I think we definitely need to have a discussion on that. I'm not quite sure if guidance is the right word. Maybe, Mats, it's something we can discuss, and maybe we can launch another query on the coordination practice network to collect good examples and kind of come with like what comes across in the different countries. Aine from Tanzania asks, are we going to have checklists and a range of indicators of the new integrated programming principles? Annex number 1 of the new guidance has a checklist with 33 or 31 some kind of indicators, with also a range where you can answer from 1 to 5 completely fulfilled to not fulfilled at all. So that's already available, which your UN country team can be using, but which also your UN the peer support group can be using.
Also, the companion piece on the programming principles. These are, well, not a checklist per se, but these are basically a series of key guiding questions to help you focus on leaving no one behind. For example, it asks you a couple of questions, how to go about orient your analysis towards leaving no one behind, and which can also eventually serve as sort of checklist at the end for quality assurance.
Thank you, Rio. Question from George Nalenga, if I remember well, from Egypt. With this new guidance, should midterm review of UNDAF be conducted? We did not put this in the new guidance. We also didn't say you cannot do it, and the main reason for this is twofold. One, we have strengthened the annual review process. We expect every single UN country team to have a one UN country results report, which includes the review of the UNDAF of the last year. Secondly, we also want to have a better UNDAF evaluation. Some of you might have seen the GIU report on the meta-evaluation of the UNDAF evaluations, which was frankly really bad. Either UN country teams did not do an evaluation, which is an absolute mandatory step, and the UNDAF guidance not only is this mandatory by the UNDG, but it's actually by member states requested. And if they were done, they weren't that great. What we've seen from experience is that a lot of midterm reviews are being done towards the second part of the implementation of the UNDAF, and very often it's done quite thoroughly, that the UN country team is really wondering, should we really do another one? Should we really do another evaluation now at the end? So that's why we kind of left it open. I see more and more in practice that strengthening your annual review process and your UNDAF evaluation process, these are the two key steps that you should be doing. And in that regard, I think the midterm review is becoming a little bit obsolete. When are you expecting the new guidelines in Spanish? From Jorge from Honduras. We'll try to get this out as soon as possible. It has been a challenge to translate these texts because there's quite some nuances in it. So I don't want to give ourselves an unrealistic timeline, but I would guess in the next 2 months or so. Question from Bhutan. What about the QSA support? We're a 2017 UNDAF rollout country and have already started the process on our own, but have not heard anything on the QSA. QSA from the peer support group. This question is coming from Hiroshi. Hiroshi, I would propose that you get in touch with the regional coordination specialist, Andrea Kushchova, who is, they actually are organizing a workshop in the beginning of May on lessons learned on the UNDAF together with the peer support group. So you might want to get in touch directly with her. Another question from Jorge from Honduras about the annual review. It doesn't say how to develop the process to do an annual review. Can we follow the process explained in the 2010 guidelines, or you can develop or update the guidelines for the specific process? The companion piece on the results monitoring will go more in detail on that. I also think it's not really rocket science. You have the template of the one UN country results report, where you also have the basic information on that. And linked to that question is that from Deborah, who says, I understood that the one UN country results report is to be produced annually. Is this the format to be used for the UNDAF annual reviews? There is a specific one UN country results report, and that's indeed the format that you use for the UNDAF annual reviews. And the other question, these are a repetition of questions that we already have answered, I think. And I think we're also now at 10 o'clock, so maybe if there's questions that we have not answered, we will definitely be answering them after this webinar. We want to make sure that you get your answer. We're also developing a frequently asked questions with questions that we are getting today and beyond that. You have our contact details, so don't hesitate to reach out to us. And before concluding, I would like to give the final words to Giovanna and Rio if there's anything else that they would like to add to this webinar.
I think I just wanted to repeat what Giovanna said before about this guidance note is a living document. So you have to keep it in the fridge after you open it. But we also encourage innovations, and we really look forward to hearing from you and get more feedback from you how we can sort of further improve the UNDAF process in general, and certainly and particularly many of the companion guidances are going to be further supplemented by actual practices and best examples. So I think we need to find the ways to benefit from your experience and feedback into the further rounds of UNDAF rollout countries. Thank you.
Yeah, at my end, I would like to first to thank all the participants, because including for their active engagement. We have had a lot of questions which are relevant for our colleagues in the different teams around the world. And therefore, I would like just to reiterate the message conveyed by Fred. If you have questions that you feel we have not properly addressed or answered, don't hesitate to let us know. It will be our duty to make sure that you receive the relevant answers. And second, these kind of questions will also help us beef up the frequently asked question document, which will be even more lively and more lively living documents than the others, because we will continuously update it on the basis of the needs and demands arising from the field. On this note, at our end in Geneva, we would like to give the floor back to New York and thank all the participants. Over. Fred, can you hear us? We have been automatically disconnected at 4.
Apologies, we were on mute. I was just thanking you and Giovanna and Rio for your participation and for all the work that you have done together with Dan in guiding this this process to the product that we currently have. I hope this was useful for all the participants. We are just launching a little poll online also to get some feedback on our functioning. So before you leave, appreciate if you can quickly fill this in. And we look forward to seeing you next week for a webinar on the UNDAFs in complex country settings. We will be hearing from Palestine and from one other country. And then in 2 weeks we have another webinar which is specifically on UNDAFs in high middle income countries, where we will be hearing the examples of Botswana and Costa Rica. So we hope we can see you all again there, and please do share the invitation as widely as possible to all your colleagues. And on that note, thank you again. Thank you also to Patience, who has been joining DOCO and was really thrown in this whole process, but done a fantastic job. So again, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we look forward to talk to you in the future. Have a great morning, evening, afternoon, and talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.